the one and only Brian Robison, member of the 2005 Texas National Championship team, spent 11 years in the NFL with the Minnesota Vikings. B-Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are y'all doing?
Man, doing good. Doing good. Zay wants to know where Splendora is.
It's in the middle of nowhere. If you blink, you'll miss it.
How did you get recruited to Texas?
Man, I was just one of those special players that, I'm just joking. Man, I guess just hard work and lots of effort, get on the radar of some people. And, God rest his soul, Daryl Drake was the guy who kind of really found me in the middle of nowhere. And he was the guy who started recruiting me and gave me a shot at Texas. And the rest was history.
Was part of it your track? You were a shot and discus guy. Was part of it going to the state meet and blowing everyone away?
I think it probably helped a lot. I mean, I think anytime you can get in the ring and you can be the number one discus thrower in the nation, you win state titles in both shot put and discus, and your name starts to float around as football as well. I mean, I think it shows that you're an athlete, and I think schools tend to take chances on that. The other part of it is just, going out there week in and week out during your high school career and just trying to put your best tape on film. And when teams start to do their research and you get on their radar, they're going to go look at the film. And if you're doing what you need to do in order to put yourself in the best situation possible to get recruited, people are going to take notice.
Yeah, Brian, what was your recruiting process like? What other teams and schools were involved? And was it always Texas once you got that call?
Man, actually, growing up, I was a huge Florida State fan. I wanted to go to Florida State. Got recruited by them a little bit, so that was kind of a shock for me. And then there was a number of schools that were involved: LSU, Arkansas, Oklahoma, A&M, just to name a few, and then of course Texas. And growing up in East Texas, the two teams I rooted for was Florida State and A&M. Actually, I wanted to go to A&M, and that all changed for me when I went on my unofficial visit to A&M. And I left there and I told my dad, I said, I am not going here. We are done with them. And from that point on, Texas became the front runner. It kind of came down between Texas and LSU. University of Houston actually had a great coaching staff at that point. Bradley Pivoteau and Dana Dimmel were kind of the guys over there. I actually love that coaching staff as well. And, I just think they probably would have been in the race a little bit more had they had a little bit more success. But Texas, for me, once that window closed for me at A&M, it was all Texas. And LSU was probably a tight second, but Mac Brown and the team we were building there, I knew we had national championship aspirations. I knew we were on the right track, and that was what I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah, you were in what some people think is the greatest recruiting class of all time at Texas, 2002. You, Vince Young, Rod Wright, Casey Studdard, Lyle Senline. I mean, it was a monster. Larry Dibbles, Selvin Young, Justin Blaylock, who played the NFL. And the funny thing is, Brian, I think you ended up playing as long or longer than anyone from that recruiting class or the 05 national championship team in the NFL. I mean, B-Rob, baby. Who had B-Rob in the pool for the longest NFL career?
Yeah, probably not many people, being a 3-star recruit and small town of Splendora, and even coming out of college. I mean, I felt like I'd play well, but wasn't a first-round pick, was kind of a fourth-round guy, flew under the radar. And, even once I got drafted, I don't think there was probably a lot of people that thought I would last that long. And heck, even myself, you always set these goals and you want to play, and you hear the averages of the NFL. And so when I came in, I said, you know what, my goal is to play, 8 years. If I can play 8 years, I'm happy. And then I got to 8, and then it was like, okay, let's play 10. And Then I wanted to play 12 and didn't quite make it to that one, but 11-year career, man, I cannot complain. I'm blessed. There's a lot of hard work and luck involved. You got to have some luck along the way. You get yourself in some pretty crazy predicaments on the field, and sometimes you got to be lucky to not get injured. And so I had a little luck on my side, along with a lot of hard work and dedication as well.
Well, you've done a great job in your next career as an analyst on the Longhorn Network, and that's part of the reason we wanted to get you on today, B-Rob, because there's all the talk about the Texas defensive line without T'Vondre Sweat, without Byron Murphy, and you watch the game differently. You are watching, who's moving who in the trenches. What are you seeing in terms of the Longhorns as they try to move forward without T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is when I look at them, it's going to be hard to replace a T'Vondre Sweat and a Byron Murphy. I mean, Byron Murphy was a first-round pick. T'Vondre Sweat's probably going to be a nose guard in the league that's going to be able to make some hay throughout his career, obviously. But for me, what it boils down to is the guys that are there now do not have to be a T'Vondre Sweat, do not have to be a Byron Murphy. If you want to replace that type of production, you got to do it by committee. If Texas is lucky to end up having a guy that kind of takes over that role, whether that be Alfred Collins or Vernon Broughton or any of those guys, great. That's great for Horns fans. But at the end of the day, you want to see these guys step up as a group and really be able to replace that production. You had, I think, 55 total QB pressures last year between just Sweat and Murphy. That's two guys that's hard to duplicate no matter who you are in the country. Even if those guys were coming back, that is hard to duplicate. So these guys have to understand, listen, we're going to have to do this by committee. We're going to have to do this by depth. And if one of us ends up being one or two of those guys, great, awesome. That's great for our team. But at the end of the day, if they can do it by committee and they can, have 4, 5, 6 guys that can rotate, keep everybody fresh, and be able to replace that type of production, that's always good.
Yeah. Brian, the edge guys, they've been solid, Ethan Berg, Barron Sorrell, but they could take another step. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing if they do that. We know Colin Simmons coming in from Duncanville has a ton of hype, UTSA transfer, Trey Moore. He has a lot of expectation too. What are you looking forward into seeing with those edge guys and what they do in Pete Kwiatkowski's defense this 2024 season?
Yeah, I think, when you look at 2 years ago, we talked about the edge guys not getting the sacks, not getting the quarterbacks on the grounds. It was a lot of pressures. It was a lot of hurries, but they weren't quite getting those sack numbers. And then towards the end of the year, you started to see things kind of turn on, and they turned into it last year. You look at Ethan Burke and Barron Sorrell, I thought they took huge steps in their advancement as edge rushers. I look for that again this year. When you look at Ethan Burke having another year under his belt, kind of the experience with him and Sorrell. I look at a guy like Colton Vasek. Colton Vasek had a very good spring game, made a lot of hurries, got in the backfield. You look at throwing Anthony Hill into that mix, even though he's a linebacker. You look at throwing him into that mix. He's a rush guy as well. And then it's going to be interesting to me because I feel like they have a lot of depth at that position group, the outside linebackers / defensive ends. Feel like they have a lot of depth and a lot of weapons that they can use there. So what it'll be interesting to me is how they utilize an Anthony Hill and a Colin Simmons. Do they bring him in and kind of kick a Colton Vasek over and maybe take up another spot instead of having another defensive tackle on the field? It's going to be interesting to see how they utilize those guys, how many of those guys are on the field at one time, or how they rotate those guys throughout the game on third downs.
Yeah, and that's, you talk about the group working collectively, the leadership. When you watched this team through the spring, how did you feel the leadership was? Because you've got Anthony Hill moving into where Jalen Ford was. Jalen Ford, 2-time, first team All Big 12 middle linebacker. And then you've got the new guys in the middle. So what were you seeing in terms of who was leading that defense?
Well, I mean, I got to be honest. I didn't get to watch a lot of the spring practices, but just from what I know and what I have seen, these guys are going to have to lead by committee. We said it when DeMarvion and Overshone left. Who's going to be the guy that replaced that guy? And Jalen Ford ended up being the guy that replaced him. Now you're asking, all right, Jalen Ford's gone. Who's going to be the guy that steps up and replaces him? And to me, the thing that's a little bit different about this situation is Jalen Ford was becoming an older guy, right? He was becoming a junior. He was, more that guy that people had looked up to for a while, right? Anthony Hill is a young guy. He's a sophomore. He's going to be a true sophomore. So for him to be thrusted in that role isn't something that you can just label him as. He has to be viewed that way. You look at a guy like David Benda. David Benda really came on strong last year for the Longhorn defense. Maybe he's the guy that kind of do it. Maybe it's a combination of Collins, Anthony Hill, and Benda. Who knows? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You got to have a group of guys that can look upon each other and hold the whole defense accountable. And as long as you have that, it doesn't have to be one guy. It can be a group of guys. But I really see, as the year goes on, I see Anthony Hill as a guy who's going to end up being that leadership type role. I think David Benda can be in that leadership type role and be able to lead this defense and make sure that they hold everybody accountable. I mean, that's what a true captain is, right? So who are your captains on your defense, right? That's what we need to figure out. Who is the captain that at the end of the day, he can gripe at somebody, he can give them criticism, and they're going to listen. They're not going to argue back. They're not going to get defensive. They're going to listen, and they're going to hold themselves accountable, and it trickles down to the next man. So for me, I think as the season goes on, because of his play and because of what he does on the field from a physical standpoint, I do think that'll end up being an Anthony Hill Jr.
Yeah, I agree, Brian. With Ant Hill, to what you said a little bit ago, he can also play on the edge. Like, he's so versatile, but he's also so young. And that's what I'm afraid of, just kind of giving him too much, responsibility on doing certain things, and he might not be able to do what he does best, and that's just play freely and go out and knock guys out. I mean, you played with Derek Johnson, like that dude, he picked up on it quick. You know what I'm saying? And Ant Hill, he has that ability, but we got to see if he could, do all of those things that Johnny Nansen and Pete Kwiatkowski are going to ask for him this upcoming season.
Well, and I'll tell you something that really, really impressed me, and it was very early out of the box. It was the second game against Alabama. You got a true freshman out there that's rushing a very mobile quarterback in Jalen Milroe, and the way he rushed him showed me that as a young guy, he understands the game, but he also understands that if he does things a certain way, it could put his whole defense and his whole team in a bind. And the way he rushed him and was able to pull out the sacks. But even if he didn't get those sacks, the way he was able to rush him and put Milroe in a bad situation to be a quarterback, a mobile quarterback, in all honesty, told me a lot about that kid, about his knowledge of the game and how he can grow moving forward. And that just shows me, A, leadership abilities, but B, that the kid can not only play, but he understands the game and understands what he needs to do in order to help his team be successful.
What did you see, B-Rob? What did he do to take to rush the correct way?
Yeah, if you look at a couple of the rushes, I mean, he easily could have just ran around a guy. He easily could have taken the underneath move quick, which, you know what, he might have come scot-free. I don't know. But when you got a guy like Jalen Milroe, he can escape the pocket. So if you come under too quick, he's going to escape outside. If you go above him in the pocket, he's going to escape through the B gap and be able to create time to not only throw the ball, but also put the secondary and the linebackers in a bind, because now they either got to come up and they got to make the play on the quarterback, leaving someone wide open, or they've got to cover. And now you've got a running quarterback with the ability that he has, that he might be 10, 12, 15 yards down the field before anybody gets to him. So that told me a lot about the way he rushed. He came down, he kind of crashed the pocket a little bit and was able to come off at the last second, not allowing Milroe to make those quick decisions. It's a lot like rushing Aaron Rodgers in the NFL. So You don't want to take too quick of a move, but you don't want to run past him because if he does, he'll get out of the pocket and he's going to hurt you.
What did you like most about the defense this spring, and what would be your top concerns?
I think what I like most about the defense is the rushability. I think we talked about that a little bit. I think you saw a multitude of guys who was able to get in the backfield and make some plays. I mean, everybody from, Colton Vasek to, the freshman Colin Simmons. You've got the young guys that are showing up, right? Then you've got Ethan Burke, and you've got some of those guys, Baron Sorrell, that were able to get in the backfield and make some plays. So that to me was what really stood out. Biggest concern, and here's the deal. It's a spring game. You walk away from the spring game and you're like, oh my gosh, this position group's really good. But then you look at the other side, well, maybe they're really bad. You never know. But I think the biggest concern for me, and this would be a combination of what happened in the spring game, but also what we saw last season, would still be the defensive backs. There's going to be a lot of pressure put on the defensive backs as far as coverage goes. There was a few busted coverages in the spring game. And then the wide receivers really were able to make a lot of big-time plays during that spring game. So that, to me, would be the biggest concern. I don't think it's necessarily the players we have. I think it's more so the cohesiveness of that group. They're going to have to build that over this offseason, going into the season, and then just knowing how to play together and play off of each other. I think that's going to be the major key issues going into next season.
Yeah. What do you like about this Longhorn offense? I mean, obviously there's a ton of new guys, especially when it comes to the wide receivers, Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Silas Bolden hasn't even got to campus yet. So Sark has a plethora of guys that he could see with also those guys who came back from last year, Cook, Moore, etc. How do you think they're all going to fit with Quinn Ewers in his third season?
Man, I think they're going to be fine. I mean, I think honestly, when you look at this roster, and I could say this about the defensive well, but really and truly, especially for the offense, this may be the deepest this football team has been in quite some time. And what I mean by that is you've got third, fourth, fifth, sixth wide receivers that can play some ball. I mean, you look at incoming freshman Ryan Wingo, what he did in the spring game with his size and his ability. And he's like the fifth or sixth guy right now. He's like between the fourth and sixth guy right now. Now, that might change after the spring game because he had a heck of a spring game. But when you start talking about the guys that they have, they are as deep as any, if not more than any wide receiver group in the country. The question I have becomes, with the top end talent that Texas had last year, the Adonai Mitchell, the Xavier Worthy, right? Do we have those guys? And that'll be told as the season unfolds. But as far as depth with this group, I think when you look at the running back room, when you look at the quarterback room, you look at tight ends, you got Nyblack and Helm that are there. That's two tight ends that are very capable of not only, especially the passing game, but even in the run game. You've got depth at wide receiver. I think the only question for me would be offensive line. Who is that sixth or seventh guy that can be that swing guy? That's what they're going to have to find out in the offseason and preseason camp. But overall, this offense has a chance to be extremely successful during the season.
What when you look at the defense, is there a player that stood out to you that you think, ooh, this guy could surprise, or I see this guy making a move?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, I want to see Trey Moore. I want to see what Trey Moore does. I want to see what he brings to the table from a pass rushing standpoint. We know he came from UTSA, which is a lower tier conference. No offense to anybody, but it is. I want to see how he does on the big stage because I think he's got a lot of ability and I think he can really, really rush the passer. The other part of that to me is when I look at it, I really look for a guy like Alfred Collins to take a big step this year. I think he made a big step last year, but we really, as Texas fans, need that big guy to step up in the middle. And I think way that game started, the spring game started off the other day, that was no better way to put your imprint on something by saying, I'm here, I'm going to be the next guy up, right? And so I look for somebody like Alfred Collins to kind of be one of those guys that kind of is flying under the radar right now, people are going to talk about him because he's going to be the guy that replaces T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. But does anybody really think that he can replace that type of production? I don't think anybody's going to say that right now, but I think he definitely could be a guy that could be revered next year.
What's the biggest challenge, B-Rob, for an interior defensive lineman, to make that big step? Is it the hand work, hand placement, timing the footwork and the hand placement? What is it? Because, you see guys crash, but not be able to shed. And, what was the key for your development? What's the key for Alfred Collins' development?
I think the biggest key is your hands and feet working together, right? You can shoot your hands, but if your feet don't move, you're going to get beat. If you move your feet, but you don't get your hands on guys, well, they get their hands on you and now you're defeated. So to me, I think that is the biggest thing, is learning how to, one, read blocks and play off of them quickly and get to the point of contact before the other guy. That to me is what made Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat so special, is when they got their hands on guys, whether it was a reach block, whether it was a cutoff block, whether it was just a straight up double team, it did not matter. They were beating the guys to the point of contact, and they were always a step ahead of the offensive lineman, right? So that to me is the biggest deal. You got to get out there. You got to work on your fundamentals each and every day. People think at some point fundamentals go out the window and you start doing special. No, you work on your fundamentals each and every single day. When we were in the NFL, that was the first thing we did with the Vikings every day, was about 35 minutes of fundamentals. And it gets tedious. It gets boring. But at the end of the day, it helps you understand what you need to do in order to be successful in the trenches. And I think that's something that the guys cannot forget. And once they get that, learning how to work their hands and their feet together and defeating blocks, that's the biggest key issue. Don't try to do too much. That is the biggest issue.
Yeah. Well, Brian, also, with how Sark and Pete Kwiatkowski like to rotate their players, sometimes it's harder for guys to maybe get in the rhythm within the game due to them coming in and out, all the time. And I get it. We're trying to preserve these guys' energy, but at the end of the day, they're just some dudes that they need a lot of reps to really get going. What kind of player were you during your time, college and pro?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I was a guy that needed a few reps. And when I say a few reps, like when I started the game off, I wanted to get at least 2 series under my belt. If I could get 2 series and kind of get a flow of the game or something like that, hey, I was good. We can start rotating. We can move on this deal. But there's also the same flip side of the guy that thinks he needs more reps, but doesn't understand that he tires himself out before the end of the game, right? So you've got to, as a coach, and that's where I think Kwiatkowski and them have done an amazing job, is understanding their players and understanding which guys need to get that rhythm and which guys don't. I think there's been some times in the past that, after the first series, a guy rotating in, you probably got some guys over there on the sidelines like, man, like I can't get a feel for the game. I can't get a feel for a game. Well, at the end of the day, I think the biggest key for a guy is to be locked in when he gets to the sidelines, right? When you do rotate, be locked in, because you can still mentally get those reps and understand what the flow of the game is going to be. Now, physically, it's going to be a little bit different, but if you can kind of have the game in your head mentally, the higher steps you go in this game, whether it be high school, college, or pros, it becomes more about your mental capacity than your physical capacity. Because at each level, guys get leveled out even more and more. You get the margin of physicality that is difference between me and the next guy is minuscule once you get to the NFL. It's about the guys that can mentally prep themselves more than the guy next to them. And it's got to be that way when you're at the University of Texas, because you're going to get everybody's best shot. And if you can mentally prepare yourself for that and know what the flow of the game is, know what the offense is going to give you, that is going to be the key to your success. And so that's why I'm saying that there's going to be some times where some of these guys that are first string guys, they're going to want to take 3-4 series to get a rhythm of the game. But if you get out, you got to stay locked in, because if you don't, just missing those 2 or 3 plays can get you totally 100% out of whack.
I know we got to let you go here in a second, B-Rob, but did you see anything from I'm like so excited about Jere Bledsoe because he's so athletic, and it sounds like he had a good second scrimmage in the spring. Obviously, Sadir Mitchell, big guy, needs to, get back to a little better playing weight. But did you see anything from the younger guys, even the January freshmen, that stood out to you?
Yeah, I do agree with you with Jure Bledsoe. I mean, I've been seeing him for a little while now, and even last year when he was here, I mean, you just see flashes, and you knew it was there, and it's just when can he become consistent to really be able to shine offensively. I mean, dude, how do you not say Ryan Wingo? You cannot get away from this spring game without talking about Ryan Wingo, and I think the thing that is really special about him to me is he's not your ordinary freshman. I mean, you're talking about a kid that's 6'2", over 200 pounds, that can run, has all the attributes that you want. You talk about a kid that as he develops going in out the next few years, I mean, we're talking about a kid that as a wide receiver could be another first-round draft pick for the University of Texas. So I think as the offensive side of the ball, you have to look at a guy like him.
Yeah. I like Jaden Blue too. I think he's
I do like Jaden Blue. Yep.
Yeah.
That whole running back room is, I think they're going to be special for quite some time.
Yeah. Brian, we got this from Jose. Did you have the highest vertical on the team when you were at Texas?
I did actually. Yeah. At the combine, I had 40 and a half. And the bad part was I was pretty upset about that. I was not happy about it because a few weeks before that, we did a mock combine down in Houston where I was training at. And I actually did 43. And then at Texas, when I was there as a linebacker, I actually jumped 44 at one point. So, white man can jump.
I know you have
at least one of them. At least one of them.
Yeah, hey, I know you had the cornrows at one point. So, hey, you got a little bit, dog. You got a little bit.
Hey, B-Rob, we got to do this again over the summer, man. We want to talk to you about all the other things you got going on. We really appreciate it, though. Appreciate that time, and let's do it again.
Yeah, Chip, Zay, I always appreciate you guys having me on.